I never thought I would see my parents again. Not after 20 silent years. Not after building the kind of life they once swore I would never deserve. But there they were, standing in the center aisle of the county courthouse, whispering to each other with smug, arrogant little smiles, acting as if fate had finally shifted in their favor. They truly believed they had trapped me. They believed that their high-priced, aggressive corporate attorney would crush me into the dirt, and the law would simply hand them my inheritance. They thought I was still that weak, terrified 16-year-old girl they had thrown out into the cold so many years ago. But they had no idea who I had become. They didn't know the crushing weight of the gavel I now carried, and they definitely didn't know that in exactly 3 minutes. Their own expensive lawyer was about to walk right past their table, stop directly in front of my desk, and say the words that would drain every drop of blood from their greedy faces. People often look at my life now, the pristine black robes, the organized courtroom, the respect from my peers, and they assume it was always this clean. They imagine a straight, easy path paved with good decisions and calm years. They don't picture chaos. They don't picture nights spent crying into a cheap pillow, wondering how to buy formula, and they certainly don't picture a 16-year-old girl standing on a freezing front porch in late October, holding nothing but a plastic grocery bag of clothes. But that was me, 16 years old, pregnant, and completely alone. And my parents, Harold and Denise, were the ones who put me on that porch. I still remember the night it happened with crystal clarity. It was the kind of autumn evening where the wind already bites like November, and the sky has a heavy, empty look to it. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table, her arms tightly crossed, her eyes sharp and devoid of any maternal warmth. My father paced behind her, refusing to even look at me, as if making eye contact would somehow infect him with my failure. They didn't scream. Honestly, I almost wished they had. Screaming means emotion. Screaming means you care enough to let yourself lose control. What they gave me instead was so much worse. It was a cold, clipped, calculated disappointment, the kind that freezes a person from the inside out. "You've embarrassed us in front of the entire community," my mother said, her voice dripping with disgust. "You've completely ruined your future," my father added, finally stopping his pacing to glare at me. "So you'll pack your things and leave tonight," she finished, standing up from the table. They didn't even say the word pregnant. It was as if refusing to say the word would magically erase the reality of the life growing inside me. I remember staring down at my hands, thinking how surreal it was that these were the exact same hands that had held a pen in geometry class just that morning, and now they held the weight of a ruined life. I had nowhere to go except the one place that had always felt like a refuge, my grandmother's house. It was 3 miles away. I walked the entire way in the dark. Halfway there, the cheap plastic bag holding my clothes ripped, spilling my sweaters onto the wet asphalt. I fell to my knees in the middle of the road, gathering my clothes, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. When I finally reached Grandma Margaret's house, I didn't even have to speak. When she opened the door and saw me shivering, pale and broken, she didn't ask questions. She didn't lecture me. Her eyes just softened with a deep, sorrowful understanding, and she stepped aside. "Come in, baby," she whispered. No judgment, no anger, just warmth. I collapsed into her arms, and she held me like she had been waiting my whole life to catch me. For the next 20 years, my parents acted as if I were dead, but Grandma Margaret saved my life. She was a widow who ran a tiny vegetable stand on the edge of her property. She didn't have much money, but she spent every single dime she had on the things I needed: maternity clothes, prenatal vitamins, and all baby supplies. She clipped coupons like it was a second job. When my son, Jacob, was finally placed in my arms at the hospital, I looked down at his tiny, perfect face and made a silent vow. I promised him that no one, especially not my parents, would ever make us feel small again. I refused to let my life stop. The next few years were a grueling blur of sleepless nights and relentless determination. I took a job cleaning corporate offices after hours. I would carry Jacob in a baby sling against my chest as I vacuumed conference rooms and emptied trash bins. Sometimes he would fall asleep to the hum of the vacuum cleaner, and I would kiss the top of his head, whispering, "One day, you'll understand why Mommy works so hard." I put myself through community college, reading heavy law textbooks at 2 in the morning while stirring spaghetti sauce or rocking Jacob back to sleep. Law wasn't just a career choice for me, it was a calling. I wanted to protect people like Grandma, people like me, people who didn't have anyone to stand up for them. When I finally graduated from law school and passed the bar exam, I dropped to my knees in our tiny living room and sobbed. Grandma hugged me tight, rocking me just like she had on the night I first came to her doorstep. "My girl did it," she cried. For the next 15 years, life was beautifully peaceful. I built a formidable career as a public defender, then an assistant district attorney, and eventually, I was appointed as a respected judge. Jacob grew into a brilliant, kind-hearted young man. Life felt steady, but life has a cruel way of shifting without warning. One quiet Tuesday afternoon, Grandma Margaret collapsed in her garden. Her heart had simply given out. Losing her felt like losing the absolute foundation of my existence. The house felt unbearably quiet, filled with the devastating echo of her absence. A few days after her funeral, I received a call from her estate attorney, Mr. Whitaker. I assumed it was standard paperwork, closing utilities, signing over her old pickup truck, and maybe a small savings account. When I sat down in his dusty, paper-filled office, he handed me a thick legal folder. "Your grandmother was very thorough in her planning," Mr. Whitaker said gently, sliding his glasses up his nose. "She named you her sole beneficiary." I nodded, wiping a tear. "That makes sense. She didn't have much." His eyes softened. "Actually, she did." He opened the folder and showed me the financial ledgers. Years ago, a massive commercial development company had approached Grandma to buy a large, wooded portion of her farmland. She sold it quietly, but she never spent a single dime of it. She insisted the money be put into high-yield investments, kept completely secret, to protect the granddaughter who was thrown out into the cold. Mr. Whitaker cleared his throat. "After the land sale and accrued interest, the total is approximately $1.6 million. The number hit me like a physical force. 1.6 million. I covered my face with my hands and wept. It wasn't joy. It was grief wrapped in profound gratitude. She had lived so frugally, wearing the same winter coat for 10 years, just so she could leave me a fortress of security she herself never enjoyed. But peace, I quickly learned, is fragile when money is involved, because money attracts vultures. My parents, Harold and Denise, the people who hadn't bothered to call for my high school graduation, my law school graduation, or the birth of their only grandson, suddenly found out about the inheritance. They didn't call to offer condolences for Grandma's passing. Instead, a week later, I pulled into my driveway after work and saw their luxury sedan parked in front of my house. I stepped out of my car, my heart pounding with an old familiar anxiety. They stood on my lawn, looking older but carrying the exact same arrogant posture they had 20 years ago. "We need to talk," my father said, his voice flat and demanding. "About what?" I asked, keeping my distance. My mother clutched her expensive purse. "You know why we're here. That land belonged to our family. We expect our rightful portion." I stared at them in absolute disbelief. "Grandma chose to leave it to me. The answer is no." My father's jaw tightened in anger. "She wasn't well in her old age. She didn't know what she was doing. She was manipulated." "She was sharper at 72 than you are right now," I shot back, my voice steady. "You threw me away like garbage when I needed you most. You don't get to show up 20 years later and demand a paycheck." I walked inside and locked the door, leaving them fuming on the lawn. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived via certified mail. It was a lawsuit. My own parents were suing me for the entire $1.6 million estate, claiming undue influence and elder manipulation. They had hired a ruthless, high-profile corporate attorney named Richard Hall to completely destroy me. Which brings us to the morning of the trial. I walked up the courthouse steps wearing a simple, sharp navy blue suit. My attorney, a brilliant and fiercely loyal woman named Rachel, walked beside me. Inside the lobby, my parents were standing with their lawyer, Richard. When they saw me, my mother actually smirked, leaning over to whisper something to my father that made him chuckle. They radiated a sickening, unearned confidence. They actually believed they were going to bankrupt the terrified 16-year-old girl they remembered. When the courtroom doors opened, the air was thick with tension. The gallery was packed. My parents sat at the plaintiff's table, sitting tall and proud. I sat quietly at the defense table with Rachel. Then, the side door of the courtroom swung open. Their attorney, Richard Hall, confidently strode into the room carrying his expensive leather briefcase. My parents immediately straightened up, smiling broadly, expecting him to come over and strategize with them. But Richard didn't walk to their table. As he crossed the room, his eyes scanned the defense table and locked onto me. I watched the exact moment his brain processed the information. He stopped dead in his tracks. His confident stride vanished. He swallowed hard, visibly panicked, and nervously straightened his silver tie clip. Instead of going to his clients, Richard walked directly past my confused parents, stood in front of my table, and bowed his head with deep, unmistakable reverence. "Good morning, Judge," his voice echoed in the dead silent room. My parents froze. The color drained from my mother's face so fast, I thought she might faint. My father's jaw literally dropped, his eyes darting frantically between me and his bowing attorney. The daughter they threw away like trash, the woman they were trying to rob, was the very judge their own lawyer answered to in this district. In a single second, the ground shifted beneath their feet. They realized they weren't the predators anymore. They had walked straight into the lion's den, and I owned the jungle. The trial that followed wasn't a legal battle, it was an execution. My attorney, Rachel, surgically dismantled their entire case. She presented Grandma's flawless medical records, proving her mind was perfectly clear. Then, she opened a file containing my high school transcripts, medical records, and homeless shelter logs from 20 years ago. "Your Honor," Rachel said, her voice echoing with righteous anger, "the petitioners claim they are entitled to this estate, yet 20 years ago, they abandoned the respondent when she was a pregnant teenager, leaving her homeless and completely without resources." My mother shot me a sharp, accusatory glare, but she was trembling. When my father was forced to take the stand, he tried to gaslight the entire courtroom. Sweating under the lights, he stammered, I didn't abandon her. We were just overwhelmed. We thought she needed to learn a hard lesson." Rachel looked at him with absolute chilling disgust. "And what lesson exactly was your daughter supposed to learn by freezing on the streets at 16? My father choked on his words. He looked down at his lap, completely silenced. There was no defense for his cruelty. When the presiding judge delivered the final verdict, he didn't even hesitate. The evidence overwhelmingly supports the validity of the will. The petitioners have no legal or moral standing here. The petition for distribution is denied in full. The estate belongs entirely to the respondent. The sound of the wooden gavel slamming down felt like 20 years of trauma shattering into dust. My mother covered her face with her hands and sobbed loudly. My father's shoulders sagged in absolute humiliating defeat. They hadn't just lost the $1.6 million. They had lost their dignity, their pride, and their power over me forever. As the courtroom emptied, I walked past their table. My father looked up, his eyes tired and defeated. "We never should have," he whispered. My mother swallowed hard, tears ruining her makeup. "We didn't know you'd become this." I stopped and met their gaze with total, unshakable calm. "You could have known," I said softly, "if you had stayed." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out of the heavy oak doors of the courtroom. When I pushed open the exit doors and stepped outside, the cold November air felt incredibly clean. I didn't feel the need to scream, or gloat, or celebrate revenge. I just felt an overwhelming, profound sense of liberation. The hardest truth about toxic families is that you cannot force them to love you, but you can absolutely force them to respect you. I didn't just walk away with a fortune that day. I walked away knowing that the scared little girl on the porch was truly gone, replaced by a woman who holds the gavel of her own destiny.